Welcome back to the channel. It's time to talk about comic book sales in August of 2022. This information was compiled by ICV2.com. Now, we do not have great sales information. That is absolutely one of the blind spots we have as far as the comic book industry. This information is compiled from Comic Hub, which is a point of sales data system used by about 120 comic shops nationwide in North America. There are over 3,000 comic shops, I believe, at this time. So this is limited data, but it has been tested against actual sales data back in the past. Everybody hates Mantle swaps. The customers keep telling DC Comics this, they keep telling Marvel Comics this, but they refuse to listen. They think the only way that you can get new comic book characters over is by taking them and placing them into the skin of another character that's already established. Comic book customers have let their voices be heard that they don't like this practice, and the numbers do not lie. Look at the rankings for the Mantle swap titles compiled by comicbookrevolution.com. 0 in the top 10, 0 in the top 25, 0 in the top 50. Not one single title starring a Mantle swapped hero actually made it into the top 50. Let that sink into you. Also not on this list would be Miles Morales Spider-Man. That's a character that I would consider, once he left the Ultimate Universe, to be a Mantle swap character. He would come in at number 91 as well. They're trying to do team-up books, issuing #1 issues to get over Miss Marvel and Moon Girl. A #1 issue starring Wolverine coming in at number 66. Wolverine traditionally is the second most popular character in the Marvel Comics arsenal. This was a tried and true way to get new comic book characters over, but when it comes to Mantle swaps, it just doesn't work. They did the same thing with Moon Knight. Top 20 seller in today's comic book market, the Moon Knight series, that thing couldn't crack the top 75. And if you look at the bottom, isn't that sad? Avengers and Moon Girl #1 debuting at 175. DC Comics and Marvel Comics know that people do not like Mantle swap characters, yet they keep going back to this over and over and over and getting the same results, except over time they become less and less effective. DC Comics are Mantle swapping all their major heroes. I Am Batman, a Batman solo title, coming in at 148. Absolutely insane, thinking that Jace Fox would get over on his own, calling himself Batman. Comic book creators like Tim Sheridan would like to tell you the reason they have to do this is because people don't want new characters. They think this is a cheat code, but really it's a stick of Acme Dynamite, and it blows up in their face every single time they try to go to this trope. DC Comics and Marvel Comics are going to continue to ruin perfectly good characters by putting them in the skin of established characters and ruining the possibility of ever getting these characters over and being popular in the mainstream of comic books. The proof is in the pudding. It absolutely does not work. Now let's talk about the dead titles walking. Marvel Comics had 32 dead titles walking, 5 of which didn't even make the top 200. 35% of Marvel Comics titles in August of 2022 were dead titles walking, much higher than the 17% of Marvel Comics that didn't make the top 100 in July, and also much higher than the 22% of Marvel Comics that didn't make the top 100 in June. But these numbers are absolutely brilliant. They're amazing when you compare them to DC Comics. They had 31 titles outside the top 100. A stunning 10 of those were unranked, period. They didn't even make the top 200. 49% of DC Comics are dead titles walking. And the truly bad thing about all this, it's actually better than July 2022, when DC Comics had a stunning 52% of their titles outside the top 100. 8, count them, 8 Batman associated comic books are outside the top 100, including Batman the Fortress #4, a comic book actually starring Bruce Wayne. Far too many DC Comics titles aren't cracking the top 100. We're seeing it infest the Batman line. The one thing really working as far as new comic sales for DC, they need to understand what it is their customers are actually looking for in their superhero comic books. Far too many of their titles right now are focusing on a very niche audience of a niche audience itself. There aren't a lot of active comic book readers out there, and they're focusing in and writing for demographics that maybe make up 5 to 10% of the actual comic book reading audience themselves. This is a very troubling trend on the part of DC Comics. They need to get a handle on what is going on and present comic books their fans actually want. Hopefully, maybe at the end of Dark Crisis, we will get some type of reboot, a new focus, and new writers. There are far too many bad writers right now at DC Comics. They brought in Stephanie Phillips, Vita Ayala, Stephanie Williams, Tim Sheridan, Clunrat, all these bad creators, and people have figured out by this point that they can't write comic books. Now let's look at the debut issues, the #1 issues debuting for Marvel, DC, as well as some independent comic book publishers. There's definitely some highs in here, but there's far too many misses when it comes to their debut #1 issues, which should be selling a ton of comic books just based on the comic book collecting and speculative audience themselves. Edge of Spider-Verse #1 coming in at #2. That's a win. Predator #1, shocking me, coming in at #3. Deceased War of the Undead Gods, the final chapter of Deceased, coming in the top 10. That's definitely a win. Batman One Bad Day, Riddler #1. I think this is bad juju. It's kind of successful, coming in at #14. At least it made the top 20, but it was so bad and such a huge turnoff. They may have poisoned the well going with Tom King out of the gate with these One Bad Day stories. Batman White Knight Presents Red Hood #1. Sean Gordon Murphy and Company continue to have a solid presence in the top 20. Now let's look at number 65. Gun Honey Blood for Blood #1 from Titan Comics. And look how many Marvel and DC comics actually debuted #1 issues underneath this one. Gun Honey Blood for Blood #1 outsold Miss Marvel and Wolverine, Gambit, New Champion of Shazam, Miss Marvel and Moon Knight, Thunderbolts, Damage Control. Why is there a Damage Control series? No one asked for this. Tales of the Human Target #1. That is a bad side. This is a one-shot meant to placate readers and get them ready for the second half of Tom King's story. Debuting at 105, that is bad juju. X-Men Unlimited, X-Men Green, why are they even printing this stuff? But Olympus Rebirth, Sword of Azrael, none of these things are selling. Giant Size Gwen Stacy's finish up a comic book that started 2 years ago. And Harley Quinn, the animated series, The Real Sidekicks of New Gotham Special #1. Why is T. Franklin still writing at DC Comics? She puts 0 asses in seats, and she's one of the 2 or 3 worst writers in all of comic books. Far too many DC and Marvel titles debuting underneath Gun Honey from Titan Comics. That stuff should not be happening. There are a few other troubling signs as far as the August sales data that we do have. We'll start out with Marvel Comics first. What the hell happened to Captain America? Sentinel of Liberty and Symbol of Truth both debuted inside the top 10. Symbol of Liberty, the Falcon Cap series, plummeted almost immediately outside the top 100, but it looked like Sentinel of Liberty, the series starring Steve Rogers, might find a home in the top 50 and find some type of stability as far as comic sales go, but it's already dropping like a rock and probably won't be in the top 100 within 2 or 3 months. I can't believe how much they've destroyed Captain America at this point. Black Panther actually started out pretty good under John Ridley, but just a couple of days ago, I talked about Black Panther #9, and this thing has absolutely dropped like a rock. Once people realize just what a bad writer John Ridley is, sure, he got lucky with a few issues up front, but this thing is absolute trash, and the sales data backs that up. And finally, let's talk about Captain Marvel #40. This thing has a home outside the top 100. At this point, I think they're just producing it and releasing it and not rebooting it, so they don't have to be embarrassed when they reboot it for like the 14th time in like 8 years. I don't think spite is a good reason to continue publishing a comic book. The Avengers definitely need some TLC, although they are getting a big event coming up. Another issue going on over at Marvel Comics are the lower tier X-Men titles. They have absolutely died. New Mutants 28, Beat Ayala. Legion of X #4, Cy Spurrier. Marauders #5, Steve Orlando. Knights of X #5, Tinny Howard. These titles should not be performing this bad. Perhaps New Mutants, because at least that's up to like number 28. But Legion of X, Marauders, and Knights of X are all relatively new. Jordan White has far too many incompetent creators over the X-Men office. We know he's not really even running the office at this point, but none of these things are selling. It's time to find a new direction for X-Men. It's time to find some stability and hit some of those sales and maybe have some success like Spider-Man's having right now, which we will talk about here in a minute. Now let's go over to DC Comics and talk about their trouble spot, and it has to do with Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. The week Dark Crisis #3 was released, they changed the title of the series to Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths. The reasoning being, at least I assume, was so they could resell these comic books to the same customers with new trade dress on them. Axe Judgment Day #1 resolicitation makes the top 100. Dark Crisis #2 is the only one that we can see, and it barely made the top 200. You did a marketing gimmick to make people go and rebuy these comic books, and that is not working. Also troubling are the titles associated with Dark Crisis. Dark Crisis itself is selling fine. It's in the top 5. But Dark Crisis, Worlds Without a Justice League, Green Lantern #1, coming in at number 56. That is troubling. Once again, coming out of the gate with this series with Tom King and what he did to Superman probably turned a lot of people off. Dark Crisis, Young Justice #3. Quite frankly, I'm shocked that it's in the top 100. But this is associated with the big event for 2022 in DC Comics, and it can't even crack the top 50. People are enjoying, at least the retailers are, to a degree, the main title, but they're checking out of the rest of the stuff. and changing the name of the event has not resulted in better sales as far as resolicitations, lagging far behind Axe Judgment Day, which I think is a worse event if you ask me. Now let's talk about some of the things that are working. Specifically at Marvel Comics, we have to talk about Spider-Man. This is what you want a nice, healthy franchise in your comic book universe to do. Every single new comic book associated with Spider-Man that was released in August 2022 made the top 100. Edge of Spider-Verse debuting at number 2, 2 Spider-Man comics making the top 10, a resolicitation for ASM 900 almost making the top 10. The second issue of Spider-Verse did drop to the number 20. Amazing Fantasy 1000, that's a $10 comic book, making it at number 21. This is a nice, healthy franchise, and Spider-Man is absolutely working for Marvel Comics. Everyone says Batman's real healthy. You don't see a single Spider-Man associated title outside the top 100. You do not get that with Batman. They are absolutely watering it down and putting too many bad creators on Batman. Marvel have not made the same mistake, in my opinion, although they did have Spider-Punk, which was terrible. But in August 2022, absolutely knocked it out of the park. Let's go look at something I found very surprising associated with DC Comics. For months, Harley Quinn had been outside the top like 125. I said, why are you doing a weekly comic book event? Apparently, people like Task Force XX, and all 4 issues actually made the top 100. Enormous spike as far as sales and enthusiasm. I wonder how much changing the artist impacted the sales for this. Also, you do have the Harley Quinn anniversary happening around this time as well. I think Riley Rossmo's art was one of the reasons that comic book was so hard to read. One of the bad things about this is, yes, the art improved, but the story itself is still gibberish and really badly executed. So whoever actually jumped in here to check it out, I think are probably going to be turned off by that. But going to a weekly release schedule for Harley for this story arc worked. It sold far more comic books than it was before. So tip of the cap. I thought you were insane, and it ended up working for you. Let's finish this bad boy off and start talking about the big trends overall for DC and Marvel in August of 2022 and wrap this up. Marvel Comics put 7 titles in the top 10, slightly down from the 8 titles Marvel Comics had in July of 2022. Marvel Comics placed a stunning 18 titles in the top 25, absolute domination, even better than the 15 titles they did in July. 43 titles in the top 75, which was down a little bit from the 46 they did in July, and then 58 titles in the top 100. The exact same number of titles Marvel Comics put in the top 100 in June and July, so that is absolutely some stability as far as Marvel Comics dominating the top 100. Year over year, numbers are up by a large margin as Marvel Comics only had 47 titles in the top 100 in August of 2021. Over a 20% increase as far as the number of titles Marvel Comics put in the top 100 year over year from August 2021 to August 2022. DC Comics is a different story. They placed an unimpressive 3 titles in the top 10, slightly better than the 2 titles they put in there in July of 2022. DC only put 7 titles in the top 25, worse than the 8 titles they had last month. 24 titles in the top 75, which is a huge improvement over the 19 titles they had in July of 2022, and 32 titles in the top 100, which was actually an improvement over the 27 titles they had last month as well. 20 of DC Comics' 32 titles were from the Batman franchise. Absolutely shocking. 63% of DC Comics titles in the top 100 are from the Batman franchise. And year over year, numbers are down by a wide margin. DC Comics put 41 titles in the top 100 in August of 2021. A 25% year-over-year decrease for DC Comics. The numbers don't lie. The only thing working at DC Comics really is Batman themselves, and we're seeing troubling trends when it comes to Batman as well. So I don't know what the hell's going on with DC Comics. I don't know if they can fix this, but judging by what DC Comics did in Flashpoint Beyond, which had been a really good series, I think they're intent on actually destroying their universe. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I actually did a video on it talking about Flashpoint Beyond number 5 and how DC Comics are trying to destroy their damn universe. I love DC so much. It just hurts to see this stuff month after month. If you haven't seen this, check it out. And if you're on a mobile device, there's a link in the video description.